Welcome, guys, gals, and non-binary pals to this week's...
Okay, you said that way
Came
better
out too
than I was
hot.
expecting. Yeah.
Welcome, guys, gals, and non-binary pals to this week's episode of Buffy Boys, your weekly review of Buffy the Vampire Slayer from a queer, literary, and feminist perspective. My name is Joel, and one of your hosts, and with me, as always, is your other stalwart host,
Brian, hi.
Hi, Brian. I am joining you.
Yeah,
Here.
Joel, happy birthday.
Thank you.
It's the first time I've said it to you. I've been waiting for it. So since midnight last night, I've been waiting to say happy birthday to Joel because I was like, I'm gonna leave him hanging and wait until I can do it as performatively as possible on our podcast.
Yeah, Brian's trying to bring negging back. Yes,
I'm trying to bring negging back. I invented negging, Joel.
I'm joining you
I'm
here.
the Neggmeister.
I'm joining you here in the 30s, in our 30s.
In our 30s, yeah.
And yeah, I creak and I ache. But I'm the youngest old person
in the room
that you can be. Yeah.
True. No, I think, yeah. Every so often I give into the jokes around, oh, I'm so old, I'm in my 30s. Like, at the same time, we need to stop that shit because I'm sure we're making the 40-year-olds feel bad, but also it's just like, it's such stupid, shitty, like, marketing ploy stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, whatever.
Keeping it alive for my birthday, I see.
Yeah, exactly. So, Joel, yeah, how you feeling? You feeling good for your birthday?
Yeah, not too bad. It's been
Go on, yeah.
I was just saying, it's been a tumultuous couple of weeks here at BBHQ.
It has indeed. So last week, we obviously weren't able to record the episode. Joel, just like, on Tuesday afternoon when we were supposed to record the episode, Monday afternoon? I can't remember what time it was.
Monday would be, yeah.
Yeah, Monday. You just took really fucking ill.
I took my sick bet.
You did. You, puked, which I always think, is important to note because, like, when you get sick, it's like, oh, I can't really deny that I'm feeling sick, but also it was useful because puking is is not a symptom really of coronavirus.
Yeah.
So that was like oh good. Also, you didn't lose your sense of taste, so that was also a good big plus. But
I certainly didn't get worse.
Yeah. Anyway, you went to bed. You had a big old temperature on you, and you went to bed, and you conked out for
spoken tongues, I think.
16 hours.
Yeah, it's been for slept for a long time.
Yeah.
Had some crazy dreams, and woke up restored. So I believe I may have been hexed. I may have angered a witch or a dryad or some malignant magic user, but it was very unusual. And luckily, I was right as rain, more or less, the following day, because the following day, at the end of that day, Mother McKeever arrived.
Mm-hmm.
Long time podcast listener, longer time parent. Yeah, my mom was staying with us for a week, and that kind of was right in the back of that illness, and she's still here. And I've shown her how to download podcasts onto her phone now, because apparently she's been listening on her laptop. So there's a possibility she may eventually hear this. Yeah.
She was sitting there. She was like, "Yeah, I just felt like it was much easier if I could listen to podcasts on the go, because just sitting there and listening to it and doing nothing else didn't feel very much like the intended use of it." And I was like, yeah.
I'm explaining that to some people in a professional capacity at the moment as well, so it's actually not that unusual, I thought.
But it's been a lovely trip so far. We have eaten a lot of tasty food. We've pretended we don't drink as much as we do around her, which is always a good fun. And then she's setting off in a couple of days. But okay, the bronze banter. Actually, no, Buffy and Summary. That's what we usually do.
So we're here to talk about an episode we remember incredibly well, which is
we watched it 2 weeks ago.
Season 7, episode 4 of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Help!
I need somebody. Okay, and here's your Buffy and Summary. Oh, sorry. Okay, it was directed by Rick Rosenthal, who last directed Normal Again. It was written by Rebecca Rand Kirshner, who last wrote Hell's Bells. And here is your Buffy and Summary, actually. But Cassie's precognitive powers indicate her imminent death. She asks Buffy for help. Buffy has Dawn befriend her and saves her from demon-worshipping fellow pupils, helped by Spike. Cassie drops dead anyway. I think you could have added a line there at the start just to be like, here's who Cassie is.
And nevertheless, she persisted to die.
Yeah.
So this was an interesting episode, definitely. One which we'll come to after we return to the Bronze, which has announced it is now taking bookings again for indoor dining. So we're going to sit again, have a scone. And talk about what we've been bronzing on for the last couple of weeks. So I think the first thing I want to bring to the table is we watched conveniently on Netflix, was it a week ago? The 1990s horror film Candyman.
Yeah, it was a weekend. I think it was a week and a half ago. Oh, and we watched another movie the next night as well, didn't we?
Yeah, let's stick to the first movie first.
Okay, go on. Yeah.
And we obviously watched the original Candyman for the first time for both of us.
Yep.
Because there is a new version, Nia DaCosta's Candyman, which is in cinemas currently.
Jordan Peele written or produced?
So Jordan Peele co-wrote and produced it, and Nia DaCosta co-wrote and directed it.
And people have been like talking about it like it's a Jordan Peele.
I'm being specific, because they have almost exclusively said Jordan Peele's Candyman. I think we can maybe chip away at that a little bit here.
Yeah, I mean, like, a black woman directing. This is the first time in history that a black woman has opened number one in the box office, right?
Yes.
As a director. Like, what the fuck is wrong with this world? I mean, like, a director of a piece is one of the most declarative voices of a movie.
Mm-hmm.
How have we excluded black women and just women in general and queer people for so long from these roles?
And they're so, like, not that they necessarily have to be, if you get me, but they're so good and so as well. So I have seen.
I can't wait for the first, like, I want there to be trashy movies made by or directed by black women.
Mm-hmm.
I want black women to make the comedies they always wanted to see growing up, and the the romance movies they always wanted to see growing up. That's what you need to do. Anyway, sorry, I've interrupted you 5 times. Please go.
No worries. So I've seen the new film. I saw it last night, but you haven't had a chance to see it yet because you also had a bout of a manly illness.
Yeah.
So I won't necessarily get too much into the new film, but I will say it is very much the new film, Candyman 2021. Is very much Nia DaCosta's film. It doesn't, there's elements of Jordan Peele in there, but it's not a Jordan Peele piece, and there's some very distinct stuff. But anyway, we saw the original on Netflix, and the original, for those who are unfamiliar, is kind of between two eras in many ways of horror. It's after the boom of the 80s slasher horror, but before maybe the kind of the post-modern or the new wave horror of kind of the 2000s. And it was quite interesting. I've always wanted to see it. It's kind of like maybe a second tier horror film, but definitely one that I was very aware of in the kind of canon. And unique or interesting for a few reasons. It's very much centered on black experience in the projects of Cabrini Green in Chicago. And many and the majority of the characters are black. It's in a black community, and the protagonist, or no, that's not what I mean to say, but the monster, the villain, the killer, maybe most accurately, is played by Tony Todd, and he is an urban legend, the Candyman, a slave who was tortured and killed by a white mob in, I think, the 1800s for having a relationship with a white woman, and he had his hand cut off, replaced with a hook, etc., covered in beads. And if you say his name 3 times or 5 times in the mirror, you'll summon him and he'll kill you. So it's engaged with a lot of interesting things. Some of the visual stuff in it was very interesting. It was very different. I don't feel like it followed all the beats that I would necessarily expect for it. There was some really striking visual stuff. There's a lot to say in the original about urban legend, and about and something which the revival goes into in even greater detail, but that very much how amongst black communities there is an oral tradition, a storytelling tradition that is not necessarily reflected in white communities, and also how and this is kind of reflecting things that black writers and black reviewers have said about the film, is that black people are much more open to superstition in some ways, and kind of like are not going. There's a real trend in both. I suppose what I'm trying to say is in both the original and the revival of white people dismissing the threat and just thinking that it's completely that there's nothing that they don't understand, whereas the black communities are like, even if it is true, let's not take the chance, because like, why would we risk it?
Yeah, there's also the element there, like, while there is the actual genuine like cultural beliefs in like, obviously stuff like voodoo comes from like Haiti, which is a very like predominantly black country, or entirely black country is our originally, I'd have to presume, and just like there are plenty of like African traditions of magics essentially, but apart from even that, you kind of get the sense that black communities believe in these horrific things because they have known this genuine constant horror, like growing up and experiencing like life in America as a black person to experience horrors that you have to be aware of and like know in advance and avoid and not mess with.
So it's a very interesting point you make there, and I don't think it goes into spoiler territory to say that something which is very heavily implied in the original film is really much more codified in the revival, which is that for these black communities which are very much ostracized and subjugated on America, and it really does center it in this very neglected and disadvantaged by the city community, and that is massively and predominantly black. Scary stories and urban legends are not something very safe and spooky, you could say. And then you go back to your pizza party, you know, a lot of scary stories that people hear are things that actually happen to people that they know. And that's, in some ways, these urban legends are a way to rationalize and center you know, that it is like put a name and a face to something which is otherwise formless. And as we've always said, we're not hyper qualified from any kind of personal experience to speak to that, but I think the film explores it in a way that simply many other films don't. But the original, which we watched and we enjoyed, is flawed in a couple of ways.
The main character, my main issue with it is that I'd say to some degree due to studio pressure, the main character is a white woman who experiences this terrorizing by a extremely sympathetic black villain monster. But and like, you know, I think expressing this character's pain and anger through as a monstrous thing, I think that's good writing. You know, the movie felt black in itself, you know, like it felt like a black piece, which is like so strong, but ultimately it did also feel like, oh, I wish this hadn't been centered around a white woman who essentially at the end of the day is somewhat a savior, though she has made mistakes within the film.
And she is specifically, you know, the main character Helen is a white, very privileged academic who is going in and for, you know, quote unquote, kind of on an expedition into this, you know, foreign territory to learn about, and like that is called out to a certain degree, but not sufficiently. There's something to be said with the fact that it's actually, I don't know if I mentioned this to you when we were watching it, but it's based on a Clive Barker short story.
Oh, I believe it.
Clive Barker being the writer of Hellraiser, and was originally set in England, so there's maybe elements of that as well. All of that is very fertile and very interesting, I think, in the original, and the way that they develop that thematically in the reboot or the revival, really, I think is very interesting. So we might park discussion of it there until you've had a chance to watch the revival, because I think there's some really and there's just loads of people we love in the revival. One thing I will point about the original is that and one of the problematic things is that Helen has a black best friend who kind of is just there to do her dirty work to a large degree in the plot. But she's played by Casey Lemons, the black best friend, you know, quote unquote, the character, the archetype. Who plays Bernadette, who the same year, or maybe the year previously, played the black best friend of Clarice Starling in Silence of the Lambs.
Who in a really in Silence of the Lambs, really compelling character. You know, like I don't think the character has a significant equivalent in the original novel.
I don't believe so, no.
In Silence of the Lambs, but which I haven't read in a million years. But that character was really compelling. But unfortunately, she was mostly just a sounding board for Clarice Starling, and the same in this as well. But in Candyman, she's also a victim. So, and
Casey Lemons actually went on to have a prolific TV career, but she's also a prolific and successful director as well.
Love it.
And there's she's married to someone interesting who I recognise. I'll show him to you later, but just basically talks about how she sees herself as an artist, and she writes scripts every day. Anyway, I thought she's a really interesting figure, so I would recommend that. I think Candyman is worth adding to your horror repertoire. I had a great conversation with my mom actually on the walk back, because we talk about critically and kind of get so into horror and all that stuff so much that for someone who doesn't spend all their time doing that, I was like talking to my mom, it's like, well, in the film, you know, this happened, but you know, what do you think that kind of represented? Or doesn't that remind you of how, you know, for example, this happens to black people, not in a horror context, but kind of an everyday context. And she's like, oh my gosh, it's like the layers under the layers. And I was like, yeah, it's like most horror films, not a lot actually happens.
Yeah, it's all metaphorical. We watched Parasite with her the other night, and it was wonderful. She absolutely loved it, because like it's such a lovable text. It's so stupid and funny,
so watchable
and engaging, and a perfect flow to the film. And then also quite tragic. And then at the end, she came in a few minutes later after having a cigarette and saying, who was the parasite? Yeah. Because at first I thought it was the poor people were parasiting off. Well, I shouldn't say parasiting. That's me saying parasiting. We're being parasitical, I suppose, off the rich people. But the rich people needed them too. Who's the parasite? And I was real like. Yeah.
Well, like we always say, like if it's readable in the text, it should be readable to anyone. Yeah, and that's all there is to it. Yeah.
If that's what you walk away from that movie with, who is the parasite? It's like, chef's kiss. That is the movie doing its job perfectly.
Absolutely. And I suppose next, kind of lastly, in terms of maybe the Bronze Banter, I think you read an interesting. We both engaged with content separately for once this week. So there's a graphic novel you were reading?
Yeah. I'd love to talk about the other two. We should talk about the other two again at some point, because the other two is back for season 2 and so good. And Evil is back from its mid-season break, and the first episode, we haven't watched the second episode yet of the second half of the season, but the first one was so fucking good. It was unbelievable.
It was another Hush type episode, basically. Yeah. It was mostly silent. Yeah,
it was almost entirely silent. There was like 2 conversations in the entire episode, and it was tense, and it didn't take itself too seriously. It was really good. Yeah, usually recommend. If you aren't watching Evil already, why aren't you? Go watch Evil, please.
Again, one of my top 2 recommendations. If you like Buffy, you'll probably enjoy Evil. Yeah.
So I read a graphic novel last week on the recommendation of Buffy Boys Super Fang Forever for Life, Gary, who was telling me to read a graphic novel called Sabrina by Nick Dornaso, which is spelled Dornaso. And it was pretty stunning, actually. It was about kind of a it's about a murder and the kind of alt-right extremist culture in America, and people pursuing conspiracy theories, and how the grief behind a murder is not just this loss of a person. It's the ripple of, in these situations, is the ripple of like constant harassment and questioning by the people around them. It's a really interesting graphic novel. The visuals I would probably compare most accurately or most likely to a to an airplane safety guide. You know, those things that are like, take off your shoes before getting on the
fun slide,
or please smile while you put your mask on your child. You're both going to die. Make sure that you're not going to die first.
Sounds like a Bright Eyes song.
There is, oh my god, you remember the beginning of at the bottom of everything?
I do, yeah. I remember very well.
That. Anyway,
I remember you playing that song to me, like, isn't this a great song? I was like, this is incredibly depressing. And you were like smiling at me, like, yeah.
Anyway, so the visual style of it is very similar to that. There's just Gary's pointing out to me that there's a lot of blank faces that essentially throughout, or you're supposed to kind of like project your own perspective onto it. Onto the characters in their moments of grief, and it was haunting. There's some imagery in it that is just like, was really tense and scary and stuff. I also picked it up for like £8. It was like cheap as chips. Definitely recommended. A lot of fun if you like being depressed, which I do.
Great.
Okay, Buffy.
So speaking of projecting ourselves onto things, we watched Buffy at some point, and we watched this episode Help, which is the Cassie episode, which is I actually think quite a memorable part of season 7, kind of thematically.
Well, I think one of the reasons that she is quite memorable is because her significant reappearance in the season as the first.
I think that's one of the reasons why she's memorable. Although I think that the first appearance is secondary, maybe, to the impact she makes in this episode, because this is like a really close episode. It's a very the stakes are of one, one person, and I thought it was a very enjoyable development of the Buffy back in school kind of arc. And I think thematically what I really felt that this episode was driving at was that Buffy fundamentally cannot accept that there are some people that she can't save. And in the past, as we noted, this has enabled her to do things people would never expect.
Save Dawn in a situation by sacrificing herself, or
even like defeating Angelus, the way that she handled like the mayor and all that. That's a certain fundamentally unbendable conviction that everyone can be saved on some level. And really, I think that kind of, if we had have ended a season 5, one of the reasons why that conclusion for Buffy would have been so perfect is she ran into a situation where she actually couldn't save everyone. And then because of Glory, so she kind of acknowledged that the loophole is she has to, not the only person she doesn't save is herself.
Yeah.
Which is why I really like the ending of that season. But yeah, I think this was, I felt a number of positive things here. I enjoy the investigation. I enjoy having all the Scoobs involved with that. Dawn kind of having a very clear role in it. Dawn showing the Summers women's incapacity to lie effectively, because like as soon as Cassie asks her like, why are you following me, she's like, okay, yeah, my sister is Buffy and she did tell me to do this. And I liked that we really saw Buffy kind of doing her detective skills and really spending a lot of time with Buffy trying to, you know, find a way around it and find a way to you know, put herself between Cassie and this thing that she was convinced that was coming. I think one of the reasons why it's memorable as well is that although watching it now it's relatively, I think, a digestible episode, but at the time I felt like they were talking about kind of suicide and self-harm and depression and you know, at least alluding to these things, which actually have quite often been you know, while they're things which are very much part of a lot of content for people around that age, the kind of the demographic that will go in the Buffy kind of core demographic, it didn't really seep into Buffy very often, so I felt it kind of stuck out for that.
Yeah, it's an odd one. I remember watching this episode like very, very clearly at the time, and being very scared and very sad watching it, and very like much not understanding why it happened or why any of this was, you know. And but it's an odd one. I think it, as an episode, it actually highlights a lot of things that have really changed since season 1. So tonally, like obviously in 2002, you're kind of getting into the emo era of the mid-noughties. Like at this point, goth is kind of making a comeback more so than emo, but that's definitely like, you know, a very persistent theme throughout the late noughties. I like, mean, in 2006 and stuff, you get like the Daily Mail being like doing headlines like My Chemical Romance made my child, you know, cut herself or something like that, all that nonsense. But at this point, it's like you kind of really get that sense here that like, oh, this is an active thing, that it is a, you know, it's a current day concern in a way that wasn't present in 97, you know, when Buffy started. You also get things like, you know, Willow using the first instance on TV of the word Google as a verb.
Weird.
Which is so weird in this episode, which again, impossible in previous seasons. And then also I thought very interestingly was the character joking about being gay, but not joking, telling Buffy that he was gay because he wanted to sleep with her, making light of that. Whereas in season 2, or was it 3, you had Larry, I think it was 3, you had Larry, like, you know, kind of like tenderly coming out to Xander, and, you know, Willow very gently exploring her own identity. And season 4, you have like it never being spoken of her sexuality, but like it very much being part of the theme and stuff, and having it at this point being like, oh, I can kind of just say it and I can make a joke about it.
The implication around the Larry era being that it was something you wouldn't want people to think of you. I'm not saying that obviously this guy didn't necessarily, like, he felt it was so obvious that he wasn't straight to his friends that he was kind of joking about it, but there was still a sense of like the joke, gay people are not necessarily the joke within the text. I did write down Buffy the Ally because she's like, oh, well, let me tell you, it's perfectly okay to be that way, you know. And it's like I think I would be a lot better now if Buffy Summers had have told me it was okay to not be straight.
Stop, gosh. I love her so much. But yeah, no, it's an interesting episode. And
bursting in here, can we acknowledge, when we kind of talk about the various racial pitfalls and ups and downs of this show, maybe the synecdoche of that and the kind of the crystallization of that in a way that's almost unparsable is the interaction of Robin Wood saying, you know, about something like, oh, this wouldn't have happened where I come from, and Buffy being like, the hood. And him be like, no, Beverly Hills. Which is a hood. I feel like I can't unpack that. Like, so much going on there.
It's funny because I think it's actually like it's I would say that probably there's some people being like, well, we have black representation in Angel, so we don't need to be too worried about it there. And really, like, it was handling black representation in Angel so badly at the time that, like, you know, Robin Woods is actually, by virtue of being a fully fleshed out character with his own sense of humor and, like, you know, self-awareness and, you know, personhood, is far better representation than Gunn ever was, unfortunately. Or to this point, I can't remember if Gunn gets better over the years. But it was very funny.
What did you think of Cassie as a character and Cassie as a performance?
Oh, as a performance, Azura Sky, is that her name? I think it's Azura Sky. I like her a lot. I was trying to figure out what else I know her from. Basically nothing, though. She's a real, like, you know, she's a real proto-Dakota Fanning, I think.
Proto-Fanning?
Dakota Fanning.
Mine was better.
Yeah, it was, but I wanted to one-up you. So I like her a lot. I thought her performance was really good. I thought she was extremely notable for a character that just appeared on the screen out of nowhere and died in the same episode. Really well performed. And, like, you know, kind of emo and kind of gothy, while also not being too emo or gothy, and kind of, like, having a good sense of humor and being easygoing, because of, like, you can't actually be emo in Joss Whedon's world, you know? But no, I liked her. The actual theme itself, like, at the heart of it, is actually, like, of the episode is quite difficult to unpick, I think. Like, what is this episode trying to say to us? Is it trying to say that Buffy can't save everyone and there's an element of, like, nihilism or acceptance there? Is it trying to communicate that, like, you know, Buffy will always try? Is it trying to communicate that, like, it's a bit of a messy one? I think it's something that, like, we'll have to unpick through the season, because I think it's an odd one for sure.
I think there are two scenes in this episode that kind of contribute to kind of what the message is trying to be and what's useful for the message we're building as we kind of culminate the show. And one of the opening scene, which is quite bizarre and comedic, which is Xander, Dawn, and Buffy hiding in coffins to wait to stake someone who is in a funeral home. Firstly, so many questions about it. Like, why this time do we have to go to a funeral home? What are they going to say when the body is missing? A whole kind of thing. But Buffy, you know, Zanger's like, you know, this is, like, incredibly, like, inconvenient, whatever. But Buffy says, vampire by vampire, it's the only way I know how.
I think that's a good key for this season. Yeah. In the sense that, like, what Buffy can do at the moment is just be herself. She's one person, and the important thing that she does in this season is redistributing the power and enabling this power and action in so many other young women.
100%. And at the end of the episode, Cassie says that you didn't fail because you tried. Yeah. So trying to build this idea that it is the process and it is the intent and it is the work that is the Slayer strength and it's the white hat behavior. It's not the numbers. Yeah. You know, and it's not the totality of it. And I do think that generally, most of the villains in the show or most of the characters tend to think in terms of more materialistic or completionist. Like, the fact that people are ever talking about, like, ending the world, and it's like, for what? It just sounds complete. Yeah. Whereas the objectively good characters are the ones who are like, no, we're just going to keep going day after day. And I think that's actually the real dichotomy in the show, rather than any kind of objective good versus evil.
Yeah, and it's for sure true. The scene with Tara's grave I found, like, very affecting, very touching, very sad. I still think that, like, Tara is underserved by this season overall, but that scene was really touching. The image of Willow putting the stones on Tara's grave. Did you read about this at all?
I didn't read about it. I just wrote down Tara really likes rocks.
Okay,
so that's the depth of the house. It's like,
it is an old Jewish tradition. Okay. You bring a pebble or a couple of pebbles to a grave when you go visiting, and every time you go, you bring more. It's actually of unknown origin, so people aren't sure where this kind of originated, but it is an old Jewish tradition. I think it was a really beautiful note. I found it so touching, you know, bringing Willow's like, I would say probably mostly cultural Judaism, because I don't think she's religiously Jewish. I think she's culturally Jewish mostly. I don't think you can be religiously anything in this world, in Buffy world, because, like, you know, religion doesn't really make a huge amount of sense in a world with this stuff happening.
With objective. like that's a bigger
when hell exists and you can go there and
you can go there through the school library.
You can go through the school library. It's not the same. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So I thought the fact that it was just like a metaphor without an actual origin of like a known origin, but just expresses this deep grief. I thought it was really beautiful and really, really affecting. Anyway,
grounding for her.
Yeah. And Willow, I think, is like, actually has a great arc in this season. I think she's really coming back to herself and finding herself and getting to know herself again, which is just really strong and really cool. I think one of the other notable things about this episode is that it's, again, very interesting in the sense that it's all like quite a big callback to the Reptile Boy episode from season 2, which is where Buffy and Cordelia obviously get locked up in the basement of the frat house because they're going to be sacrificed to a big penis demon.
Good times.
Yep. In this season, in this episode, you have a bunch of like wannabe frat boys, probably some secret society, who are attempting to sacrifice Cassie to a demon to be rich and stupid, essentially. I
have written down, these are some real alt-right looking motherfuckers.
They truly are. These are all Trump voters. So they attempt to sacrifice to Cassie, and Buffy instead refuses. She infiltrates it and stops them, kills the demon.
Infiltrates, and like, how did they not see that one of their number was like a woman in her 20s?
Yeah, fucking idiots. Anyway, and it was a powerful moment. It was also a very nice callback, I thought, and a nice like reflection in the sense that like in that episode, Buffy is in a predicament and the victim herself, and in this episode, she's very much the savior and the person who has the power and will fix it continuously, and she's that in the previous one as well, but she's saving herself, she's not just saving herself in this episode, whereas in that episode that was her primary motivation, to save herself and Cordelia. And then I suppose the last thing we want to talk about probably is the Spike stuff in this episode. It's pretty interesting. Spike obviously like being in the school comes to help Buffy with the with the sacrifice stuff. There's a moment where I was very surprised they'd never done before, which maybe they did and I'm just misremembering it, but like Spike does beat up one of the boys and experiences the chip firing in his head and just goes through with it anyway to beat up the kid because he is attempting to sacrifice a young girl, essentially. And I was like, oh, they've never done this before, but like communicating this as like a Spike whose soul is hurting so much that he feels so compelled to do the right thing by hook or by crook that he will like punch through that pain. I was like, that's an interesting visual little note. Yeah, I found it really, really cool. And also I just found Spike's presence in this episode actually quite like interesting and useful.
Yeah, and I think they're still trying to grapple on screen with, whether he is dangerous or not, I think, in an interesting way. Like the way they're like, oh, he hurt the girl, but he's actually like feeling guilt over what happened with Buffy, etc. So it's quite a forcible transformation, quite a complete transformation, and a transition. But I think they're trying to set him up. So I often in retrospect was like, how does Spike get from where he is to like being a believable champion when he gets to Angel? I always thought maybe that was a bit forced, and I'm thinking, no, he actually kind of does go through the ringer to do this. And something we talk about in Angel season 5 a lot more is Spike a much more worthy champion because he fought and earned his soul and wants to do it where Angel was cursed. And I always thought that was kind of a compelling argument.
It's compelling, but it's also like deeply flawed, as we've talked about. Like
I know, I just I don't know, I think I'm enjoying what he's bringing to this season
for sure. Okay, I think that's enough discussion for this episode, given that our memories of it are so vague, and your mother just came in and asked if she could take a photo of us, to which I rudely said 5 times no.
Just one after the other. No.
Let's keep going. Into the dusting.
Yeah.
Okay. Some Buffy Bits for you, Joel. So Glenn Mosshauer, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, who is Cassie's dad, is actually Landry's dad in Friday Night Lights, which is the character who Jesse Plemons plays. The guy who's in Fargo, and I think we should leave. Was that what that was called? What was that movie called? With
I'm thinking of
Ending Things.
I think You Should Leave is Tim Robin a sketch show.
Oops. Emma Caulfield and an actor called Beth Slap, who unfortunately never went on to do much more stuff, were credited in this episode, but not featured. Their scene was deleted. Anya accidentally in that scene persuades a woman into forgiving her boyfriend instead of telling her to curse her, basically. And I'm glad it was cut, because I'm really depressed by all these scenes where Anya is just on her own and talking to strange random women and being like, this is enough of a storyline for this wonderful character for this. Thankfully next episode is Selfless, which is maybe my favorite episode of season 7, if I'm being totally honest, and has Anya full a full, powerful, and wonderful episode. So, as we noticed, this is the first use of Google as a verb on TV. Cassie's name, obviously, very clear origin in this episode. Cassandra being the Greek figure who could tell the future, but who nobody would believe. Cassie in Skins would be a similar kind of thing. Cassie's also reading Slaughterhouse 5, another book in which the narrator knows when he's going to die, which I think is probably appropriate. Also Slaughterhouse 5, Kurt Vonnegut classic. It's such a good novel. Cassie's wearing 2 different White Stripes t-shirts through the episode, which is pretty cool. At one point, I think Willow refers to her as a precog, which is a Minority Report reference. A Minority Report, a movie in which there are no Minority Reports, interestingly enough.
We did get frustrated with that particular plot hole.
We really did. And Cassie, towards the end, when she's saying, of course I'd prefer to go out shopping, I'd like to, be doing anything rather than just dying, very much echoing Buffy in Prophecy Girl, which is very interesting. And I suppose the last thing I'd say is Mark Field notes that episode 4 always shows the challenge Buffy will face in the season in metaphor. And in this season, it's like how Buffy can actually make an impact. Is helping one person isn't doing enough anymore. Yeah, and she needs to scale. She needs to scale up, essentially. I think those are my Buffy bits. What about you, Joel? Do you have any?
Yeah, I have a couple more. So Willow makes reference to the fact that she wrote a Doogie Howser fanfic when she was younger. Doogie Howser, being an American TV show, was featured a juvenile physician who was for some reason accredited, played by Neil Patrick Harris, who Alison Hannigan went on to work with on How I Met Your Mother. There's a first appearance in this episode of Amanda, who is a high schooler who recurs in Potential and goes on to be one of the Potentials who was activated at the end of the season. There's an incredible note about her on the wiki where it says that she displays similarities to the Slayer archetype in this episode by virtue of having a tendency towards violence and also dating boys who make her miserable.
100%.
I suppose it's like that's all you need to be a Slayer these days. I also enjoyed Buffy's scene where she went to see Cassie's dad and just had absolutely no chill and burst into his house and being like, are you beating your daughter? And him being like, because you're an alcoholic, and him being like, who are you? I think she might be a terrible counselor in some ways. A terrible employee.
She has no qualifications.
Terrible employee of the city.
She's just been told to go here and do it, and no other feedback whatsoever. It's such bad hiring. I need to inform you, Joel, I've just got an email, very importantly, and unfortunately went to my spam folder. I would have responded more quickly, but it's from your funeral advisor saying, get your funeral plan quote today.
We'll get on that as soon as possible. And lastly, I like that when they look up Cassie's incredibly GeoCities website, CassieNewton.com, and I need to go and check after this if that website
it was live for years. It
active.
Probably isn't anymore, but we should check that for sure.
It's definitely archived somewhere.
Okay, so some fashion notes for you there, Joel. Xander in this episode, another thing which is different, is wearing yet another picnic blanket when he goes to visit Tara's grave. He's also wearing the biggest trousers I've seen on TV in years. I guarantee they'll be back in style any day now. I'm not joking. When the best friend Mike of Cassie is wearing a zip up open collar shirt or t-shirt basically thing, and it's really wide net brimmed, and it's this is very 95 or 74. It is not okay for 2002. I really didn't like Dawn's blazer when she's talking to Cassie after school one day. It's kind of like, it was like a red velvet blazer with like a weird and bad pattern, and I hated it. And yeah, I think those are my most of my fashion notes. I also, just looking here, I do have a note that says Buffy kicking the shit out of a child because he called her a stupid bitch.
Yeah.
Which does happen.
But it's absolutely fair. And also the only note I'll add to that is the outfits they wear for their sacrifice to the demon. Also, there's a demon that appears in this episode, but it's kind of really an afterthought, to be honest.
It is, yeah.
It's quite a cool looking demon, actually. I thought the character design was great. It just was really perfunctory.
Yeah.
But they're wearing, there's this crossover in like American supernatural TV between graduation gowns and what cults wear to sacrifice women. And I don't know what that's about, but they're wearing those kind of burgundy gowns as well.
Okay, so Joel, do you have a death count for us?
Yeah, I do. I have one unidentified vampire who we know is not peaceful, staked by Buffy. I have a lass who is the demon burned, the cool looking demon burned by Buffy with a torch, who explodes in a really unconvincing CGI explosion for some reason. It's like they've done better, and it was just like this little GIF art explosion. And Cassie Newton died because of a congenital heart defect.
We really should have mentioned that at some point during the episode.
She dies.
She dies.
She dies.
Okay, do your rating for me, Joel?
Yeah, I think I'd give it 8.2 obsessively sharpened pencils.
Yeah, go on, tell me about that.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I thought it was almost an episode of Buffy you could lift out and show people. I think there was some.
Okay.
What?
You say that a bit every single fucking episode, go on.
No, sometimes they say you can't lift them out and show it to people. And it's also one of these phrases I use in work a lot that just seeps into my day-to-day vocabulary. I think it is, it was it was a complete thought, I think. I thought that Cassie's performance was good. I thought Dawn had some of Dawn's dialogue was a little overwrought, but I thought Michelle Trachtenberg really sold the excitement of like being on the team. And I think everyone who was there had something to do, so I enjoyed it.
Yeah. I'm gonna give it 8.1.
Did we agree? Have we agreed?
No, you said 8.2.
Okay.
8.1 thighs unused out of 10. I really liked it. I thought the emotional poetry was genuinely hilarious. My only bum note was the scene where Dawn was like, no, Buffy, you made a difference. We were friends, and that was because of you. That was real hard to watch. But otherwise, it was very good. It's a very memorable episode for me. And yeah, I think it's like high quality. There's absolutely nothing I would knock about it in a significant way. Mm-hmm. I just really, I really wish they'd really leaned into the back to high school theme more in this season. It could have been so good.
We're going on. No, it was a good episode.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move on to the Cordelia Chase.
Yeah, so over on Cordelia Chase, we've Slouching Towards Bethlehem, which we've always said was a title of something, and it's this.
Yes, yeah, exactly. I like one of my favorite Buffy or Angel titles.
It is the thrust of the entire episode is that Cordelia is back. She doesn't have any of her memories of who she is or what she is, but like all amnesiacs on television, she does remember how to like walk and talk and like using ATM. But it's mostly about her not believing Angel, her not believing that evil things exist, them trying to protect her, trying to reintroduce her, hiding Lauren, all this kind of stuff. And I to some extent I don't have a lot to say about it because the whole episode is really a back and forth about that, and it's setting up. The purpose of the episode is to set up I believe a contrived situation where she ends up with Connor, and not with the gang, and separated. And actually looking back, the implication I believe is that this is still Cordelia. It's just amnesiac Cordelia.
Yeah, she should be the same person. Oh no, she's not though.
No, she is. So I think the lore is that Jasmine doesn't activate until her memory comes back, and with that Jasmine rushes in as well. So while this isn't our regular Cordelia, I think it's still meant to be Cordelia.
So she should have the same personality, which is like, actually considerate and not just like, horny for children. Yeah,
she's quite hostile to everyone, and the main driver of her wedge is that she feels that Angel is untrustworthy and lied to her because he didn't immediately, like within 30 minutes, tell her all the horrible things about the world. And they very clearly articulate they will tell her this. It's just we don't know if it's going to be overwhelming, and we just want to keep her safe and make certain she doesn't run away first, which I think is perfectly reasonable. And they show her some of her old stuff. They show her high school yearbooks. There's some callbacks there. They try to make her feel comfortable. And this kind of contrived notion that Connor is the only one who is honest with her, so she's going to go stay with him. Now, maybe that's Jasmine influence or not, but I do feel it's meant to be that this is Cordelia. She's always a little bit hostile. And the problem with really Cordelia's characterization in season 4 is like she is written that despite Charisma's Carpenter's incredible amount of likability, she's written to be unlikable.
Yeah. And
written to be abrasive and difficult and flat. You know? There's some interesting monster work because one of Lauren's customers who comes to him is a demon and is but it's also like this salivating tooth monster and chases Cordelia, I think, through the hotel. So that monster is kind of interesting. But there's not a whole lot else going on in the episode. And it's, again, setting up conversation about there being something dark coming down the road. But sure, what season Buffy and Angel isn't doing that.
But Joe, we are now 4 episodes into season 4 of Angel. What has fucking happened?
Yeah.
Literally nothing has fucking happened. You know, Angel got fished out of the ocean. Cordelia turned up. Everyone talked a bunch about fucking nothing. I just want anything to happen. Anything at all. Don't like it.
There's some stuff with Wesley as well where he helps find Cordelia and brings her back to Lila, or back to Angel. But Lila does that because that's what she wants him to do, etc. And again, Wesley has an opportunity to interact with them, but they kind of fight for, again, no really well-discerned reason. So it's constructed in such a way it's like, okay, this is where they're staying no matter what they say.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say 6 failed feminist gestures.
Yeah, I was going to go for same.
Yeah, perfectly fine.
By which I mean, like, you know, I can barely remember the episode, so 6 seems fair enough.
Okay, but we're on the upshot with Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
And I was really convinced we were going to get to record an episode this week, to be honest. So
here we are.
Great, yeah.
And I'm happy to do it because it's a bright light in my day. I love to spend time with you. I love to spend time with our super fans. And this is only what I want to mention lastly. My last bit of Buffy bite here at the end. I don't know why I'm going down. It's only the second time that Buffy has described herself as Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Which I enjoyed. So that's us for this week. Next week, as you mentioned, we're watching Selfless.
Can't wait.
So until then,
there was a time where we used to say what episode we were going to talk about next week, and we completely just forgot to do that at some point. Yeah,
and this is very typical of our podcast because I try to reintroduce it subtly, and you called it out.
Yeah, you know what's funny is that we've now, I think, overtaken buffering the Vampire Slayer, as far as I know, which has been going on for much longer than us, because a lot of
never heard of it.
A lot of Buffy podcasts end up the successful ones end up branching out quite a bit and then doing other episodes about different things.
Buffering write a song for every episode.
They write a song about every single episode. That is
I just
so
have to come up
impressive,
with a new name for you.
Yeah, exactly. And Slayerfest obviously, for one thing, took a break from Buffy stuff because of the Joss Whedon stuff, which totally respect.
Yeah, and also does a lot of great other pop culture stuff and loads of different.
Just never fucking stops. He does following him on Instagram or on Twitter is actually dizzying because he's just here are the 8 projects I'm working on this week, and it's I work on one project every week, and it is too much.
But sometimes we both get so sick we have to lie down.
But I think we're probably going to end up overtaking Slayerfest to get to the finish line, which is exciting. Yeah,
and which ultimately, as this episode Buffy proves, winning is all that matters.
Exactly. I've always said that whoever finishes recording their Buffy podcast the first is actually the best person.
Yeah,
it's a known fact.
You were always saying that years ago. It didn't make any sense. But now it's finally coming into context. Okay, folks.
Oh, sorry. One very important thing. It's Elizabeth.
Yes, it is Elizabeth. A correction. And
Shiny red ukulele. Buffy Superfang extraordinaire has officially corrected us that the pronunciation is not Elizabeth, It's Elizabeth.
Yeah, we're going to
so
find out.
sorry.
We're going to find out a shiny red ukulele or something now.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's
Joe's,
it's a constant struggle.
Joe's going to get your name tattooed on his skin to apologize.
That's a big commitment.
Okay, that's me done.
And that's me done too. Thank you everyone for joining us. Very happy to have you with us. If you enjoyed this episode, please let us know. Tell your friends, tell your counsellor or therapist. If you're not going, you probably should be. And we will see you next week right here on Buffy Boys.
Buffy Boys.
Buffy Boys.
Happy birthday, Joe.
Thank you, Brian.
Bye.